Thanks for coming.
Hi everyone.
I present you Maria João Andrade from Reading Mind. She accepted kindly an invitation to talk with us here for the art and craft of game programming. So, sorry, it is yours. And thank you.
Well, I apologize in advance if my English isn't the best, because I'm not used to talk in English. But what I want to bring you all today is a compilation of information that I've been bringing in talks like this to game developers, to parents, and about the psychology of video games. And I think this is important for game developers and the people that work in this industry, because it can improve the video games that you make, and also bring some utility. Oh, yes. So I was telling you that I think this information I will give you will be very important for the game development, because the psychology talks about us, talks about the human being, and we play video games, and we play games since the beginning of times. So first, I will present myself for you to know me better. I'm Maria João Andrade. I started playing very young because I had cousins, boys, that loved to play. So I loved to play with them. I had my first computer in 2002, where I started to play RuneScape, Puzzle Pirates, Sims 1, Silk Road Online, and many other games that many of them I don't remember. Then in 2007, I got into my first online video game community. We didn't have a name, we just found ourselves in Lineage 2 and started playing, and then we started a community. And then in 2010, I got into a gaming association, Grow Up Gaming, and I was in Furthering 2, that I'll talk after this. So, in psychology, I finished my master's degree in clinical psychology in Ispa, and then when I finished my course, I had to participate in a project for my internship. So, because of that, I created the Apoio ao Jogador project in Grow Up Gaming Association. It was really successful, it was great. And after that, many opportunities emerged, like Rubber Chicken. I am actually a redactor now. I collaborated with NPCL. I was mental coach at FTW Sports in a professional team. And I won a scholarship for a PhD called Gamers Flow in Ispa. Then I started working at Miniclip, where I actually work right now as player experience representative, and I do private practice as clinical psychologist. So, Running Minds was an association that I created with a group of people, and we found a need in Portugal that was to help society to adapt to the technological modernization. So this was a thing that we see in the media, we see in the families, the need to understand better what a video game is and what are the risks, the real risks, and the benefits that the video games have. The transformation of the stereotypes and taboos that exist in our society, like a girl can't play, doesn't have that capacity, or like the gamer is that boy, very petty, that doesn't do anything else, only play. So these stereotypes, we want to change that. The action and prevention of risk behaviors, they exist, and we have to know what they are. Because to the game development industry, it is important to know what are the real risks, because that will protect yourselves too. We are in a world in this time that isn't adapted to these technologies. So what happens most of the times is a demonization of video games. So it is important for the game developers to know what are the real risks, game developers and society in general, and professionals that work with these types of cases, to know what are the real risks for them to be able to prevent this kind of behaviors. And the final one, the promotion of a healthy living of video games. This will bring less feelings of incomprehension from the players, less misinformation from the players, family, society, and less activity, distrust, and judgment. So many of the services that we have is health and well-being support, psychology, etc. Talks, like we are doing right now, presence and participation in events, and many others that you can see also in our site. Well, now talking about what we are doing in here, I think, and many authors in psychology think, that knowing the human development and knowing the context of gamers, the culture, its social life, etc., can help game developers to improve games that promote a healthy living. And this doesn't have to be a separate thing, video games in one side and a healthy living in another. We can promote a healthy living with video games, and video games have that potential. But it is important to know these two things. Some numbers that we have, and we know that video game industry is big and it's growing. 95,000 millions is the estimated profit in the year of 2017 in the video game industry. 40% of European population plays video games. It's a lot. 1 in 4 adults play video games at least once a week. 57% of Portuguese people between 15 and 24 years old has a console at home. And 65% of American houses have at least one player that plays more than 3 hours a day. This is big. This information shows that this is a world in big growth. So we have to be attentive to the risks and to the benefits. João Andrade said one interesting thing. He was an historian and a philosopher, and he said that the human being is Homo sapiens, Homo faber, and Homo ludens. What he said is we had the ability to think, we had the ability of making objects, and we had the ludic element that brought the civilization development. So the game always was a part of our lives, and this helped us to create the society that we have today. We might imagine Caesar, for example, in the Great Wars, the strategy that he had to put into his actions. So everything was a game. So what drives people to play instead of watching TV or sightseeing or anything else? Well, some authors have been studying this, and Kuttner and Olson found that fun, excitement, competition, win, and have a challenge discovering the game is one kind of people that is motivated for these things. Then another thing is friendships, enjoyment in making new friends, having a social life. Another thing is emotions, anger and problems. Sorry about the download anger and problems because there's a mistake. So dealing with anger and problems, avoiding loneliness, it's a thing that sometimes the video games can be an escape from the bad things in life. But this we can do that with other stuff, like watching TV or doing other activities. So video games aren't bad only because we are avoiding some stuff in our life or we are relaxing. But if we do that excessively, of course, that will be bad, as anything else. So another of the categories was boredom and play because you don't have anything better to do and you like to do that. Well, these were 4 categories that Kuttner and Olson found. But another question, more questions were made. What leads people to choose one game instead of another? Well, authors found that personality traits and humor and mood these were fundamental. And these were certain things that the personality, for example, if someone is more depressed, more sad, that will condition the games that this person will choose. So it is important. Richard Bartle said that there were 4 kinds of players: the killers, the achievers, the socializers, and the explorers. Quantum Foundry is it's a company that studied these 2 that we will see after this. But Richard Bartle brought this theory up. So the killers were those players that want action in the game, that want to do fast things in the games. FPS are a type of game that really is a great example of this. The achievers, that kind of people that that like to achieve everything in the game. So they want to do all the quests, all the side quests. They want to achieve all the things in game and say, I did this. Everything in this list is made by me. So the socializers that want to be in the game but can be talking with his friends. And the explorers that want to explore the world, to do creative stuff in the world, like Sims, like an MMORPG where they can explore the world around. So he talked about this. But this model wasn't empiric, so it wasn't studied. Quantum Foundry brought this model up, and they found in that number of gamers, it's a lot, there were these categories of gamers. So the gamers who liked action, and action was found that was connected to destruction and excitement, and destruction is guns, explosives, chaos, so that kind of stuff. And the excitement was the fast-paced games. So they had a positive correlation, and these were action games. They were considered action games. Then the social games that had the competition, duels, matches, high ranking or low ranking, but had the social part and the community. Mastery, that has the challenge, that has the strategy, so Age of Empires like, so games that involve some strategy more than action. Achievement, like I said before, those guys who like to do everything in the game, that have the completion and the powerful character. They have all in that character. Immersion, that has the fantasy, MMORPGs, where you can explore the world and the story. And creativity, that have the design, the customization of things, and the discovery. So, what we found with the personality traits is that action and social are associated with people with high levels of extroversion, optimism, socialization. They like fast-paced games, more social games. So these were data that was really evident. In other cases, the creativity and immersion games were associated with people with high levels of openness to new experiences, curiosity, imagination, and alternative vision. So this was relevant too. In terms of gender, and I don't know if you knew this, but in USA, and this is data from 2017, 58% of the gamers are men, and 42% of the gamers are women. So, what Quantum Foundry found was that women were more into games like fantasy, design, history, feeling of having completed something in the game, of the game itself, but be careful. This data is not very significant. So there are girls who love the part of competition and excitement too. But if we think in our society in this moment, and if you look, for example, into esports, we don't see much teams of girls. And some of you have any opinion of why does that happen? Why don't we see girls in the competition?
Maybe they just don't have that much interest.
Maybe the community don't fit in up really. The community isn't very welcoming.
Okay, isn't very welcoming. Right. So you touched two very important points in there, because it's true. If we see interviews to players, to women players, in the case of Counter-Strike, for example, they say that it's really, really, really hard to be in the competitive world because they are bashed, so bashed, because they are girls, because they don't have the competency to play. So this is a thing that is important. Also, the interest is important for us to see too. But if there is this bash by the gamer community, it's natural that they don't have such an interest to get into the games too. So these are society things that are changing with time, because we see much more girls than before, like we see in the numbers. These numbers are related to the things of the games in the apps, because we see many women playing video games now in the apps. So, in the case of the men, disruption, challenge, competition, excitement, strategy seem to be the games that they prefer. But these are not significant numbers, because we see men in those types of games and women in those types of games, okay? In terms of age, the mean age of men is 33 years old, and in women, 37 years old. And what the investigation found out too is that games that you like to play change with age, and the interest in competition decreases dramatically with age. And now this gets us to a question: that is the game industry adapting the games to the age of people? Do you think that this is happening? For example, an MMORPG that involves so much time to play, that involves so much grinding. Do you think that is adapted to the adult world?
No.
Why?
There is no realness, because it doesn't capture all the nature of the reality.
Okay.
And I think that I think they don't have one characteristic of resilience in society. They just did one step and then just quit. And all development is always continued. It's not always a straight line. There is sensitive periods and then critical periods. And I think they only touch on the critical periods. I think they doesn't focus on the sensitivity.
Okay. You think that on the older people?
Yeah.
Okay. They don't touch on the sensitive side of the game.
Yeah. They don't touch on the sensitive side because they don't. Sometimes they lack a humanic perspective. They take a lot of human parts, just put a lot of time consuming, because people normally work, and if they were very addicted to the game, they deprive a lot of their times and just protect themselves.
Of course. Okay, so that is an important point. There are no games that are adapted to the adult world. And sometimes, and that happened to me, when I started to do many stuff in my life, and I love to play MMORPGs, but now I can't. Why can't I? Because I don't have any time. So we have to think ways to adapt games to the various ages of people. And this is important because we always think about the theme of the game, what we are going to do in the game, but not what are the population that we are making the game. Yes?
I'd just like to make a point on that, what seems to be a trend now is people replacing the grinding time with you just paying for it.
Yeah.
Yes. we go to the discussion of the loot boxes now.
Yeah.
Yes, that is another issue, so the consumerism in the games too. So
I meant that as a way of adapting the game.
exactly, to these people, yeah. So it would be relevant to think about those ways of creating games that were adapted without money, the need of money, to this kind of people. And also the older people, but older, elder people, because there are people that really like to play games, and if we create games to that kind of people, they will get many benefits from that, because the games improve many things in our cognitive system. So, then, interest in competition decreases dramatically with age. That might be another motive. So the people doesn't have many time to practice, so they don't get to the competitive side so much. Well, another thing that is important to talk about is this concept, that is flow. This concept is really important for game development because it talks about the subjective experience that all the players, or no, not all the players, but when we are doing an activity that we really like, we can feel this thing, flow. It's an emotional subjective experience in which one activity leads the person to an optimal state of enjoyment that makes him or lose track of the time. So this is really important. And how do we achieve this in the game? So what investigators have been studying is that we have to have a challenge level and a skill level in the game that is balanced. So you don't want a challenge level too high, and if the person has a skill level that is low, you won't be able to do the game because you won't know, you won't be able to play it because it doesn't have the skill. But at the same time, if you put the skill really high and the challenge really low, what will happen? The game will be too easy, and the person will lose interest in the game. So this balance between challenge and skill is really important in the game and really hard to achieve. So this has been studied now, and it's also the theme of my PhD too in video games. Flow is a subjective experience, therefore it's difficult to guarantee it in a video game. And it's not achieved in the end of the game. Flow experience is achieved in the little tasks that the player has in the game, little objectives that the people have to do in the game. So this explains a bit of it. It has to be an action opportunity. The player has to know what to do, has to know how to do it, has to know where to go. And then it has an action, a night challenge perception, so it has to perceive that, oh, this is hard, this is a challenge for me, and a high perceived capacity, so you will look at the challenge and say, I can do this, I'm excited to do this. So these are feelings that the player has to feel, and the freedom from distractions. Then with this, a performance feedback, it's really important. So you are doing the game saying you are doing okay, you are winning this because you did that. So giving feedback to the player, it's really important because that will keep the player interested in the game because he's winning something, he's getting something. Okay. Then we go to another part that is more psychology-like in the development of human beings, but it is important for you to know because if you want to do some games that are adapted to certain ages, this is important. So, the human development and the games in the human development are considered really important. Piaget and Vygotsky talked about the game, not video games in their time, but the game itself was seen as a really important thing. So the greatest acquisitions of a child are achieved in the toy, in the game, acquisitions that in the future will become their level of real action and morality. So the games improve how ourselves, how we are going to do in the world, what we are going to do, what we are. So this is an important thing. So in terms of ages, until 3 years old, the child is understanding their body. So they have to use the senses. They have to understand how their body moves. Okay? So when we think about the children that are used to playing in tablets with 2 years old, that isn't much good for them. And the authors are studying that because they are in a time that is important to know their body. So the creation of routines and time references, which will help in the use of the screens later, it's learned here. So from 3 to 6 years old, the video games can help to develop intuitive and hypothetical deductive intelligence. So that thing of you fell in the hole and you start again. And you start walking again and you fell in the hole again. And the child starts to understand with an error what she has to do. So the video games help in that. But it's also really important not to replace traditional games. And when they play video games, they must be supervised. It's important because their bodies are still being discovered. Their worlds are still being discovered. So it's important, everything, but with measure and with some careful. Okay, so from 6 to 9 years old, the video games stimulate innovation, creativity, strategy, cooperation, adaptation to society. Taking into account the violence or other content present in the video games, we will talk about this later, but the presence of family and dialogue are fundamental in this stage. So when we see those ages playing, it's important, like some video games showing what's right and wrong with video games. Using the video game as an educational way of passing information to the child. 9 to 12 years old, it's the online games discovery habitually. So it is preferable for the player to play online games because in these cases we are preventing the isolation. That is one characteristic very common in the video game addiction. So we are preventing that type of things. From 12 years up, advantages of video games if they are playing with weight and measure. So it is important to create routines. We have time for everything, for school, for family, for the girlfriend, for the whatever. So in this type of things, we have to think that we have time for everything and we have to have routines. The prevention of isolation or overuse of video games, it is important in this stage too. So culturally, video games are seen as immature in our society, like something, cartoons, comic books or something like that. And, oh, it's just a game, he's playing, and it doesn't matter. But this is a more mature world than what people think. And certain stereotypes exist, like the girls, like I said, like a person that plays a lot can study, or a person that plays a lot doesn't have any friends. So these stereotypes have to be broken. So one of the things that we are talking about now, the negative effects of video games, and not the video games itself, because this is not a cause of video games. And this is important to know. This is a thing that comes from people, and we have to understand why. So internet gaming disorder, what it is and why it's important for you. In a world that is demonizing video games, like I told before, it is important for you to know what is this that is characterized as internet gaming disorder. So it is formally recognized since 2013. It is characterized as persistent and recurrent use of video games, often with other players, leading to clinical suffering as indicated by 5 of the following symptoms in a 12-month period. So the main characteristics of this disorder is excessive concern about the video games. That person is always thinking about that. I have to go to the game, I have to do that, I have to do this. And it can't be present in the moment, in the street, talking with friends, is thinking about the game. So this is excessive concern about this thematic. The symptoms of withdrawal when online video games are taken away, the low tolerance when the video games are taken, the unsuccessful attempts to control the participation in online games. For example, so I will study this hour and then I will play video games for some time. And the person can't do this, so it's fixed in that activity. The loss of interest in old hobbies or entertainment as a result, except for the video games, so that it loses interest in everything, but only video games are its interests. Continuous and excessive use, manipulation of family members, therapists, and others, and using video games to avoid or relieve negative emotions. But like I said before, we can't see these points as solo points. We have to see these points as a connection to all of them. And when, believe me, and I'm a dreamer, and I've seen cases like this, when this activity turns excessive for the person doesn't see anything else, and it's only the game. And it sometimes not even eat, not even sleep, not even to be with family. They gain, they win. They're winning, but they're not winning. They are not winning at all. Social phobia and stuff like that. So it's really an issue. And then disinvestment or loss of meaningful relationships, employment, career opportunities, and education due to participation in online video games as an excessive activity. Possible effects that are connected to this are neuroticism and depression, aggressiveness and hostility, low self-esteem. I can't talk about all of this because it would be days to talk about every one of these factors. But well, you have an idea. Low emotional intelligence, anxiety, alexithymia. So the excessive use of video games becomes an escape, only an escape. Like it could be anything else, any activity. So it becomes an escape from the real world, from the frustrations that the person has. Are the games the cause of addiction? You've seen, it's not. Video games don't get people addicted. People get addicted to video games, and this is a phrase that is very important to know. One author says that it is the psychological needs that aren't felt in the life of the person that provoke feelings of lack of competence, freedom, autonomy, social relations, and this will trigger deep feelings of unhappiness that leads to a need of an escape through an alternative reality, and the game is perfect for that, like other activities too. Can games make people violent? Ferguson is an author that has been studying this a lot, and what he says is the video games, as other media, doesn't make people violent. What they can make is, if the people has a predisposition of personality traits that has violence in it, what will have is the video games can show them how to put that violence out. So that can give them examples of how can they be violent in the world. But they have to have a predisposition to do that. So there is no scientific evidence that by playing video games, a child or a person becomes violent. But if the child is exposed to violence in his life, domestic violence in his home, in the school, is bullied all the time since every year in school. So this will bring some violence in that child because there is a context that always has been violent to her or to him. So this can lead to that. But it cannot lead to. Well, the decision is in the person, is in the education, is in many contexts that in the person's life. It's not the video game that will insert a chip in the person's mind and says, you are violent now because you played this video game. This doesn't exist. So aggressiveness is associated with multiple factors, and we have to evaluate each one of them. Can we compare internet gaming disorder with gambling addiction? Yes, there are things that are similar neurologically when we see that, but this is really, really different. Because gambling games are luck games and bring the feeling of, irrational feeling of, oh, I'll win next. oh, I'll win next. And normally, video games bring another thing, skill. The player has to have some skill to play it, some strategy, some cognitive abilities to play that game. And that brings, in the disorder, something truly different. In the investigation in media, the violence and the negative effects are really, really studied. Violence, addiction, and healthy routines, but the positive effects sometimes are forgotten, are not so talked. Many investigators investigate positive effects too, but they are not told. So first, we have to know one thing, that it's so legitimate to look for effects of video games in general as to look for effects of food in general. What this author meant was that there are many types of video games, and their effects in the person are totally different. FPS that require reflections and a fast-paced game will require different abilities in the person that an MMORPG will, or a strategy game like Age of Empires do. So we have to analyze each one of the types of video games to be able to analyze this. So, like the meat can do an effect, the fish does another effect. It's the same thing. So, some of the positive effects, cognitive effects and cognitive benefits that were studied, these are some examples, there are several more, but capacity of attention, the improving of spatial attention, the improved ability to detect objects in the field with multiple distractions, reduced impulsiveness, help in overcoming dyslexia. This is really interesting because in America, the military is calling the young men that have played Counter-Strike because they have great reflections. So the video games are becoming a really important part of the job world too, it seems. So capacity of vision too, contrast differences are best detected by gamers. Capacity of an improvement of an executive function, so the multitasking capability is really improved. The mental flexibility, which is really good for elders, for example, because if they play video games, they are improving their cognitive abilities, and they are putting their heads working. It's really nice. So improved troubleshooting. And here we have an example of that I brought here in the Games for Good too, but I thought that this was important to bring again. So some investigators, some researchers at the University of Washington have created an online video game called Folded. And this video game it was a contest that was in 3 weeks that the players had to play the game. And this had a goal. These investigators didn't find the cure to AIDS virus in monkeys for 10 years. And with this video game, in 3 weeks, they put some young people playing the game, and they found the cure for AIDS in monkeys with a video game. So this is really important to know the potential that a video game has and impacts the world. So, emotional benefits. Many types of media adapt and improve emotional states, and the opposite. So we can have a mood that is not so good, but we can have a mood that is good. So the many types of media do that to us emotionally. So playing your favorite video game significantly improves moods and increases positive feelings. This is studied too. So we can have very many things in the games, like Fiero, an intense cry after completing a great adversity that most of you might feel if you play video games. Flow, that we talked about, adaptive adjustment of emotions. So you learn with video games to adapt to bad feelings. So if you are losing, you will have to deal with that. And these are things that you will transfer to your real life. Because when you are dealing with these failures in the game with other people around you, you will transfer that way of dealing with things to your life. This is studied too. So reappraisal, the habit of re-evaluation of situations is really worked in games too. If you try one way and it's not working, you will try another, and maybe that works. So this is reappraisal. It's shown that, for example, minimalist puzzle games like Withdrawal can improve mood and decrease anxiety and promote relaxation, which is really good to know. So if a game developer wants to do a game, to make a game that is good for anxiety, we don't have to make a game that talks about anxiety and it's very boring. No, if we know that minimalist puzzles help in anxiety, we can create a game with a minimalist puzzle that is adapted to work that, and that has a theme that is creative and good. Okay, social benefits. Development of social skills, cooperation that generalize to their external relations. So when you develop social skills in video games, it is shown that that transfers to the real world. Playing pro-social video games, I don't know if you know what it is, but it's games that promote cooperation side. So you have to help the others in the game. So what we know is that this kind of games, pro-social video games, increase pro-social behaviors in real life too. And a curious thing is that playing violent video games that encourage the cooperative side, that we have to help others in the task, like Counter-Strike, for example, that we have a team and we have to work towards a goal, these will develop more pro-social behaviors than non-violent games. So, if you work in a team in a violent game, that will improve your pro-social behaviors in your real life, more than a game that didn't have violence. This is interesting to think. So this is a growing area, and
also some games are teaching people English, which who doesn't know the English, really for young people.
Oh, to improve the English?
Yeah, because of they always want to know the story, what's going on, and then they always want to learn new words from the games.
Yes, that's a great thing too. Well, I learned many of my English in the games.
Yes.
Playing video games helped me a lot in that, so it's a great thing. So we can find benefits to many things, and we don't have to be literal. Like I said in the anxiety example, or the play with the learning English, we don't have to make a video game that says you will learn English in this. So this might be boring, but creating something that might help that, but is not literal, that can be good. So this is a growing area that researchers out of and education professionals are using even more video games to act in certain areas. So this is really good. Like, for example, the video game Remission that helped children with cancer to improve the treatment adherence. And it was great because had an impact, and it was shown that had an impact in these children to get the treatment. So this is an example of a successful video game in this area. So like I said, healthcare professionals, education professionals, and researchers are not game devs, which can sometimes lead to a video game to be less creative and motivating. Video games become broccoli covered with chocolate, like an author said. So this is important because we don't have to be literal in the teams, but we can work those teams with thematics that are good, that are inciting for the player. Most of the video games created are not evaluated in a scientific level of investigation. So if you create video games with a certain utility, it is important for you to search people that can investigate the effect of the video game, because that will give us a good tool for health, for education, for whatever, for our society, gamification. So psychology is really an area of real importance in the development of video games that can help us to create better games, more captivating, healthier, and with utility. But for that, we have to take into consideration many things: age, gender, personality, player context, culture, psychopathology. So we have to be attentive to all of these things and more. So I just wanted to bring you a little juice of these things. I hope you like it. And if you have any questions, I'm here. Yes?
I just wanted to know what was the esports professional team that you coached?
Oh, was it the League of Legends one?
Oh.
Well,
You
Yeah,
didn't
with-
tell that.
this is the League of Legends. When there was Lyot as a coach and Mini that are now in the Challenger Series. Yeah. I don't know if you have any more questions. Did you enjoy at least? Did you learn something with this? It's important for me to know.
There was a question over there.
Yes.
Mike.
This is kind of weird. Back in that slide where you showed the negative effects from playing games and
Yes.
such, I noticed one that was hyperactivity, but I thought that by playing games you would like become like mentally exhausted because you were like thinking and such. Like, how does one become hyperactive? Is that how you say it? Like, from playing games.
Well, having a disease because of playing video games, it's a hard thing to say. But when what we know is that when it exists an excessive play of video games, there is somehow an escape from something else. So if there is an excessive and compulsory doing of that, it's because you don't want to see the other stuff that is around you. And what we should understand is why is this happening? What is in the context of the person that leads her to get so enticed in that? So the hyperactivity, the cause, I don't believe that was the video games, but something else. Okay, that was within.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'm curious about our psychology, our psychology deal with a person that has withdrawal syndromes with video games. How do you put games back to a person's life with moderation when they have a history of addiction to it?
Okay. So in these cases, this is a thing that is being studied right now. This is a really recent theme in the area of psychology, and there are many perspectives. The one that I follow in the psychology is the total abstinence, and this is proven that is really the better one to follow, because video games is not like a drug, like heroin or something like that. It's different. So if you can keep it in your life in a good way, it's even good for you. So the first step is to understand why that activity is being so excessively played by the young people or the adults. So many of the cases, and there's not a high percentage of gaming addiction right now. Gaming addiction right now. The percentage in the world is like 8%, 13% of the players. So it's not a lot of addiction. But the most of the cases are cases in which there is an excessive play because there isn't discipline in the there isn't a schedule, there isn't discipline in the family, there isn't a behavior that is controlled. So it is important for working with the family, to work with the school, to work with the young, to be able to create these routines in which the video game can be there, but in a certain time, in a certain hour. And we have to create routines too. There's 1 hour for that, there's 1 hour for that, there's time for everything. when this can happen, when this isn't being followed, and the family sometimes doesn't help, so there are many factors that contribute to this, but it is important to know that sometimes there is, during the week you don't play, so you play in the weekend, if everything else is done. So it depends about the people that you have in front of you, the case, why the video games are being played so excessively, and then work that why. We know that bullying, for example, is really positively has a positive correlation to the video game disorder. So sometimes kids that are really bullied in schools may have a tendency to have that escape at home, for example. But there are many factors that are associated, and we have to analyze the case, each case, and adapt with the families, with the schools, all the areas of their life, to be able to create a system that is healthy for them. But I can give the solution because that depends on the person, on the patient that we have in front of us.
I didn't. But sometimes when psychotherapists have to take a step and reorganize everything else on the patient about the addiction, how they establish, how they regulate all the withdrawal symptoms, because they have higher anxiety levels, they have lower self-esteem, and how they rebalance everything else to make more normal.
Well, that will depend on the case, but those types of things that lead the person to play excessively, that is worked in the session by knowing what are the issues that are making that person feel that way. That sometimes isn't easy because the person is looking to herself or himself, but that is what will allow to work those things. But it's important at the same time that those things like low self-esteem, like feeling bad with their life are worked. At the same time, we have to establish routines. And I'm not the one that is making the routines. I sit the parents, I sit the patient, right? So I sit them and I put them talking, allowing they make rules, allowing them to make a work together to improve a healthier experience of video games and life. So this is important, to take note of every context of the person and for the person to take responsibility of what she or he is doing. So I will do this. The family will help. The school will help. I will help. So it's a work of many teams, and not only the psychologist, or not only the patient, or not only the family. Okay? So it's many contexts.
Because I was wondering if one of the slides is just missing, because for some examples the school doesn't care about the health mental of the patient, because some schools don't have the psychology therapy there.
Yeah.
Sorry for making so long, because I am this curious, because I'm thinking a degree on psychology in Ispa, and it was one of my main concerns because I have a brother on the same situation, and I tried to help. I hope I didn't take too long.
Yeah. With the work I do, usually when we don't have a psychologist there, or they don't really care about those kind of issues, what I do is to go to the school and to talk with the professors and to try to know information about that case, with the family authorization and something like that. So it is important for us to be inside the question. But that depends on the schools, on the professionals, the methods. I don't know if you have any more questions.
Is there any link where we can have access to this content?
You can send me an email,
Okay.
and I send you everything. If you have the website too, we will have more information in the website about these themes too. But for now, you can send me an email, or if you want some content, some specific content about something, you can ask me too. I'm available for watching.
Okay, thank you.
My next question, do you think, for example, if some social friends came together and then play the games and then being antisocial, and then some antisocial people meeting someone in the internet and getting social in the other cafes or other social areas.
Yes.
So do you think video games make the people socialize or anti-socialize? Which is more?
I don't know if I understood your question, but from my experience and for what authors say about this issue of the socialization in video games, we believe that really improves the socialization. But it's important to not keep the socialization only in the computer. So one thing that I promoted when I did that project in Grow Up Gaming was to create events for players that were presential, where they could be talking and doing other stuff. One thing that I love is board games too. So do activities that can allow people to be together, because that is really important too. For the emotional side, and the socialization requires the emotional side, we have to connect through our eyes, through our faces. It is important to have that component. So only the screens, no, but that is a part of an excessive thing. So if we can allow us to improve that side of social life and meet people with care and with security outside the game, it will be a good thing. But not only in the screen all the time, of course. Yeah, that's why associations and clubs are really great for people, because they meet a lot of people there.
My question is also related to the negative effects of most of those things on that list could also be applied to drugs, could also be applied to gambling. So, like, is there anything that makes a characteristically different, except for the thing that you're addicted to?
It's really the behavior, the excessive. It is like we say, all that is excessive is bad for us. So the experience itself is different, but the behaviors that we do, the excessive behaviors, that's common to every addiction. That's why it's an addiction. It's a compulsive behavior towards that thing. So in that, they are equal. But in the experience itself, they are different.
Of course. The other part of the question was forgotten.
If you remember.
Okay, so no more questions, I guess. So thank you, Maria João,
Thank you.
for this wonderful talk. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.